Hello! In this project we're going to do a lesson on ASP.NET to create a web application that does all of the operations for a database. Create, read, update, and delete. And so what you'll see is a result that looks like this on the screen here. You can see I have a products list, and then I have all of the associated items that go with it, such as edit, show the details, and delete the item. And so that's what we're going to create. Now in this application, we're going to take this one step at a time. We're going to create the controllers, we're going to create the models, we'll do hard-coded values and then switch to a database. And so we're going to go through this on a pretty logical and stepwise refinement kind of a process. So that way you'll be able to digest the changes and the new facts as they appear as a fairly new programmer would. So by the time we're finished here, you're going to gain a lot of knowledge about how basic programs work in a web framework like ASP.NET. Now, in a previous lesson, we created a very simple program, and I'll show you the details of what we did there. So if you want to either go back and pick up there, or else just repeat what you see here. So I created a products controller file here in the controllers folder. You can see that it has an index, we had message, and welcome. So neither of these are going to be important in this lesson. We're only going to be creating new ones. In the models folder, there's nothing new. In the products folder, there is, for the views, there's an index, message, and welcome. And so we're going to create some new things there. So not a lot of things, but we are going to pick up from this point. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create a model for products. So let's look at what we have in the models folder. I'm going to right click and add a new item. And so let's create a products model. So after I get the products model created, I'm going to give it some properties. So let's use ID, which is an integer, and let's use name with a string. Price we're going to set as a decimal, and the string is description for the last item. And so this is a pretty generic type of a product class. Now I'm not going to bother creating a constructor here. I'm just going to use a different kind of a syntax to create those when we get to the point of making new instances. Now as I'm done typing here, I noticed that I used products model, and I didn't really mean to do that. I meant to call it a product model. So I'm going to rename it over here in the Solution Explorer, and it'll ask me if I want to update some of the code to go with that, and I'll say yes. I should update it here, and let's save it. So now inside of the index action, I'm going to create a list of these product models. So list with the brackets and then the name product model, and we'll instantiate it as a new list. And you can see that I have to use the import statement to be able to use product model and to have it recognized. So the next thing I want to do is create some new instances of product models. So I'll create a add statement to add something to the product list, and then right here I will create a new instance. So I will use the format where we use the curly brackets and then specify each kind of property and what it's supposed to be. So ID is 1, and then the name is mousepad, the price is $5.99, and you notice I have to use the letter M after to make it into a decimal number. So that's a decimal literal. And then the description, of course, is something to describe the product. So you can use mousepad like I used here, or something else. So now I'm going to create 3 more products. So let's copy and paste the line that was to instantiate a new product, and then we'll go ahead and change some of the details in here. So first of all, I have to give it a unique ID number. So 2, 3, and 4. The first item is going to be a webcam, and let's rechange the price to something. Give it a description such as enables you to attend more Zoom meetings. Yay! And then let's go to number 3 and add a 4 terabyte hard drive. And you'll back up all your work and you won't regret it. And then lastly, let's put in, let's say, a wireless mouse, give it a price, and then just say notebook mice don't work very well, do they? So you can see that I'm creating an item with a price, a description, and an ID number. And this is going to make the list with 4 elements. So now that I have the products list, I'm going to send it to the view. So let's put down here inside of the parentheses for the return, let's put in the product list as our variable. Now I want to send this to a view and display the list. So the list that we have is not compatible right now with the index view. So in the products folder index, I just have a message. So I'm going to recreate this using a wizard, and I'll just delete this original one that we did in the last lesson. So index is gone. Now I'm going to recreate it. So let's go anywhere inside of the index action, and let's right click and choose add view. Let's select the proper thing. So Razor View has the ability to use a model. Let's click add. Let's select the type. It's going to be a list. And then the model class is our product. So the product model, a partial view, and choose add. Okay, so the code has been generated. Just reviewing from previous lessons what we have here. So the model is line 1. So this page here will use a list. So IEnumerable is the interface for a list and other things. And it is a list of product models. So we're going to have a table created. And inside of here we have this strange thing. So this is Razor text, or this is Razor placeholders. This will generate HTML code in the final view in the browser. And so display the name for a model is what we're going to get. So that's the head, that's the first line of the table. And you can see that we're using the syntax where we have an arrow function. So this function says take model as an input and return its name. So the reason why we go through that rigmarole of creating a small function here is because it will grab the display name, which we will update in a few minutes. And so you can see down at the line 25, we have a loop going through here. So for each item in our list, each item in the model, remember the model is a list, we're going to display one row. So let's see what this looks like when we run it. So I've got the app running here on the web browser. So I'm going to type in the word product here, and the controller name is product. And you should see all of the items that were defined here. So we have mousepad, webcam, and the other 2 items. This is the obviously the page for the index. Now let's just make sure that we see what's going on between the index code here and the web browser. So let's compare the code in here by choosing inspect element. So when I bring up the inspect element, I can select the item inspector and pick one piece. So you will see that in each of these rows and each of these data items, it's just plain text such as webcam. But the code that generated that is an at symbol. It says at HTML display for. And so this is kind of a macro or a piece of code that generates the text that shows up in the browser. So the browser just gets generic HTML, and the server uses these at symbols, which is the Razor syntax for generating HTML. So you might have realized that that was what was happening, but just to make sure, inspect the code and see what the HTML is. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to change the titles. So right up here we have ID, name, price, and description. We're going to change the display name on each of those properties so that way you can see what these functions are good for. So I'm switching back into the product model, and let's put some descriptions above each of the properties. So for the first item, I'm going to say in square brackets, the display name for the first item is called its ID number. So you will notice I have to do an import here, so using system component model, and then the underline error goes away. So let's add a description for each of these properties. You can use my example if you like. I'm going to say the next one is product name, the third item is cost to customer, and the last item is what you get. So those are approximate things that you can do. Obviously, you can change a description to be any string you like. So make something sensible and run the program. So when we go into the product controller this time, you can see that the header of the first row in the table now shows the description instead of just the product property names. So you can customize this if you like. Notice the cost to customer has these decimal numbers. It would be nice to have a $sign on those. So if you remember from another lesson, we actually changed that. So how do you do it? I'll give you a second to update that. And if you don't remember, I'll fix it for you. Okay, so did you pause the video? Let's go and fix it, and then we will display cost to customer here with dollar signs. So what you need to do then is go to the property called cost, or price I guess it is, and the price is right here on this line. So in here, what you're looking for is called data type. Data type, and then a parentheses, and then a data type inside here, and it's not working. Obviously it's not working. So what I need to do is first of all import and choose data notations, and then try this again. So I'm going to delete all of the junk that I just typed. Let's try this again. Data type dot, and let's see, is there currency? There is. Currency is here. So now currency is a data type, and it should include dollar signs. Let's see if that worked. Okay, so got the app running. Let's put in the word product here, and we will get a list. And this time you can see that currency showed up properly. So everything has a dollar sign and 2 decimal points fixed places. Now the next thing I'm going to do is generate a whole bunch of fake data. So you can see I have 4 items in my product catalog. I'm going to make it hundreds of items in just a few lines of code. So what I want to do next is search for an item called bogus. So bogus is on GitHub, and we will install it on our computer and allow us to create some fake data. So here is the description. So bogus will help you load databases, UI, and apps with fake data for your testing needs. And so it tells you how to use it down in the description. So we're going to do something like this, and here's a good example. So this is going to be a list of users in his application, and so he says faker is the type of object. So we're going to use faker. And then there's a whole bunch of rules where you have a .rule for, and then for each user in the list, he's going to invent a first name. And so it's as simple as that. Let's go back to our code and do something similar. So now I'm going back to the products controller here, and I'm going to add some new items. So what I'm going to do is take the products list and add a item to it. So .add. Now we're going to create a new faker object. So just like I saw in the documentation example, I'm going to use the word faker and then the type of item that I'm trying to create. So obviously this isn't recognized, so let's see if we can get a partial solution or something. So in this case, we have to install the package called bogus. So we'll install whatever the latest version is, and this should then work. Okay, so now we want to make some rules for our new object. So let's put a dot after this, and you can see that I have generate and rule for. I'm going to choose rule for as my choice. And then for each of these, I'm going to have a little function. So p.id is the function name. Now, what is the value? So the second item in the section here is some kind of a function. So I'm going to say I. Now, I could use I as the looper variable, but I want to start at number 5 because I already have 4 of them. So let's say I plus 5. And there is my first rule. Now, I want rules for all of the properties, so I can keep going on when just chaining these together. So the rule for the next thing is for the product, P, and let's go with the name. So what do we have for names? Well, for the second item, let's do a function. And so I'll just say F. And now the faker function has things such as products, I think. It does have a product name. No, it has a name. There we go. So I can choose a name. And then from here, I should be able to find a product, I believe. Let's see, product. And I'm not finding the right thing. So name is obviously for human name. So I'm kind of guessing at what I remember from this function. So the word that I'm looking for is commerce. So commerce, and then I have a product name, I believe. There we go. Product name comes up. So I am now inventing a product name. Now it looks to me like I need to have a function called there. And then I can go and do another rule. Now this is getting long, so I'm going to just put in a hard return before each of these periods, so that way I get a list of things. It's just a little bit easier for me to read. Okay, so far I have an ID number and a product name. Well, let's see what's the next property that I'm going to work with. Let's say the price. So a price, let's do another function. And let's call this thing F, and I think there's a random function. There we go. So random, and let's put in $100. Let's see if that'll work. So random, it doesn't like that. We have to have something beyond that. So random, I think it's decimal. There we go. So a random decimal number of $100. So now with the last item, it's going to be the description. So let's do P dot, and then description is what I'm looking for. What kind of a function am I going to use for this? So we're going to have another arrow function, F, and now can I get something out of here? There's a funny one in here called a rant, okay? So just like you would have in a product review, we want a rant, and let's see if we can do a review. So this will kind of tell us that a random review has been written for our product. Okay, so we've got ourselves 100 new products. Let's see if they show up in our list. Okay, I got the application running, so let's go ahead and put in the URL, the word product, and let's see what comes out. So you can see that in the list that I've just created, there's the first 4 that were defined, and then starting at number 5, we have these random product things. So the faker library just gives us these fake product names and then a fake rant to go along with it. So they're kind of funny to look at. And the price is some random number between $1 and $100. So if you press the refresh button, you should get a list of new products because they're just randomly generated. So I refresh the page and number 5 goes to a licensed cotton soap. So I refresh it again and now I have intelligent concrete shirt. Okay, so we've got different prices every time because every time we run this, we have a new list of products that's generated randomly. So the next step is I'm going to show you how to move all of this code from the controller and put it into a data repository and make it a little more static. What I'm showing you on the screen now is a diagram that talks about the different layers of an application. So the presentation layer is obviously the part that is presented to the user. That is the HTML code and the data that finally gets into the table. The logic tier is like our controller. That's the part that manages data and then sends it to the front end. The data tier is where you store that data. So it usually ends up coming from a database in the beginning and then gets sent through the controller to the presentation layer. So right now, our logic tier has the data in it. We're generating that. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to refactor the code. So we're going to generate a new layer, the data tier, at the bottom. We're still going to use the hard-coded and random data. And in a future video, we're going to replace that with a database. But for this case, in the next few minutes, we're just going to move our logic tier, where we're creating the data there, and put it into another service. So what I'm trying to do is take all of this code here and move it out into a different service. So let's create some services, first of all. So let's go to the Activity 2 area. I'm going to right-click and add a new folder. So I'm going to call this folder Services. Now I'm going to generate several different versions of this service, so I'm going to use an interface. So let's go add a new item. So I'm going to call this interface iProduct Data Service. And I might as well select interface from the choices here so I get the right code and choose Add. So you can see that the beginning is right here. It says we have an interface. It's called iProduct Data Service. Now the purpose of an interface is not to actually write any code. It's to create a skeleton or an outline of what other classes will implement. So this is sometimes called programming to a contract. So we're going to write the contract now for what other items have to do. So the first item that I want to guarantee that happens is a function. I want to generate a function called getAllProducts, and it's going to return a list. So I'm going to use product model in the interior. And of course I have to use the using statement to make that happen. So the first thing that is going to be in the contract is the getAll method. So the remainder of these items that we're going to put into our contract include search the products. And so we'll have to provide a search term, and this will return a list of anything that matches the term. Then the next one is going to be get the product by ID. And of course this is going to return one item. So we'll have the data type as product to be returned. Then we're going to do an insert, a delete, and an update. And so when we're done here, we're going to have all of the different functions that a typical CRUD app has to do. We have create, update, delete, and edit. And so we have the details too. So we've added this search item, which is maybe part of the display, but this is the basic things that most CRUD apps will do. Now, as I mentioned, this is not actually a function yet. It's just an interface. So now let's make this interface apply itself to a class. So I'm going into the services area, and I'm going to add a new item, and I'm going to call this a class. So I'm going to give this kind of a strange name. I'm calling it hard-coded sample data repository. Now, that's a long name, but it's very descriptive. It says we're going to make this as a hard-coded item, which means we're going to use that generated data. It's not going to come from any database. And then sample data is obviously telling us that we have fake data. And the data repository, though, is a key term. A data repository usually has those functions that are in the interface. Now, I want to make this a part of the interface, so I'm going to put a colon after here, which is the word or the way to say this extends or implements. So then I'm going to have product data service as the item. So as soon as I select that, you can see that there's a red line. And it's got a red line for a good reason. We go down to show potential fixes, and you can see we're going to implement the interface. So when I implement the interface, it's going to generate all of these functions for me that were in the interface. So all of them have no code really, but it's kind of a to-do list of what I have to create. So now for the function called getAllProducts, we're going to be able to take the code that we've already used and put it in here. So I'm going to delete this one and go back to my controller and steal the items that are here highlighted. So all of this stuff here that's in highlighted is really a data processing thing. So let's do Control X to get rid of it. And then let's go back to our data repository and paste it. Okay, so now we have ourselves a basic same list that we had before. Now, it doesn't return anything, so the get products has an underline in it. So I'm going to return the products list. There it is. Now, I would like this to be more static than it is right now. So this list of items, I would like to have available to all the other functions in my class. So right now, if I run this, I'm going to get a new list generated randomly. What I want to do is have a single list that is created the first time it runs, but not the second time. So I'm just going to cut this out and move to the very top of the class and paste it in here. So this is a class member variable. And then when we get down to the products list here, it still works, but it references a little bit more globalized view of this thing. Now, every time this thing runs, it's going to generate a bunch of new data. So the first time it will create 104 new items. If I refresh the page, it's just going to keep adding more again. So then we'll be up to 200 and something. So I'm going to do a quick check to make sure that this is not going to be creating things all the time. So what I'm going to create then is an if statement that says, if the products list count is 0, then we're going to do some code. Well, that code that we're going to generate is all of the items that are in this function. So let's just paste them inside there. So the first time this runs, the count will be 0, then we'll create a whole bunch of stuff, and then we'll return the list. Now I still have an error. It says faker doesn't work here because I'm in a new file and it says I have to use the bogus library. So now I have this service that will generate a list of all the products. Let's go back to the controller and you can see that controller is pretty empty. So now if I want to get access to that, one way is just to create a new instance right here. A hard-coded sample data repository is going to be instantiated right here in the index. So let's go ahead and include this using the using statement. So now the return is going to have a list of things. So let's go to hard-coded data repository and .getAllProducts, and that should be able to generate a list for us and to return it to our view. So I think I got it all right. Let's just test it out and see how that turns out. Okay, so I got the application running. Let's go ahead and type in the controller name, which is product, and let's see if anything comes out of this. Okay, so it looks like we've got ourselves a list of items. Now, I would hopefully think that they stay the same. So if I look down, I can see number 1, 2, 3, 4 are the same because I hard-coded those in. Let's take a look at number 5. In my case, it says Tasty Steel Chicken. If I refresh this, do I get the same steel chicken or do I get something else? No, I get something else. I get Fantastic Granite Tuna. So what I want to do is keep this list the same, or static, you might say. So let's make one change to our code so that it doesn't change every time we reload the page. So to make this change, I'm going to go into the hard-coded sample data, and right here where it's got this list, I'm going to put in the word static. And so that will generate a static list that is the same every time this is run. So that should make a difference in how our application behaves. Okay, so I'm going to go here and run the program again. Let's do product, and let's see if this works. So I've got myself a list, and let's look at item number 5. So in this time, I got Sleek Cotton Chicken. Let's go ahead and refresh the page, and let's see what number 5 is. So number 5 stayed the same. It looks to me like I now have a static list. If I go to the end, I have 104 items, and if I refresh it, I do not get any more than 104 items. It stays at Incredible Granite Keyboard as my last item. So there is a list. Now there's a lot of things ahead of us. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a database and make that the actual data instead of this hard-coded faker data. So I have a challenge for you here. It's going to be a coding challenge. What I'm asking you to do is to create another model. So we created something called a product. Well, what are you going to create? That's up to you. So create a class that represents a product. So here's some items: a movie, a car, an airline ticket, a travel package, a doll, a makeup kit. You decide what it's going to be. Make some properties in there. So it should have a string, an integer. Put a date in this time. Then you're going to have to create a controller. Instead of products controller, it might be called fingernail polish controller, or whatever thing that you created. And then we're going to ask you to generate some fake data, show it in a table, and then when you're done, just do a screenshot to see what it looks like. And the reason why we would do this is because all of this process is best learned if you repeat it. So right now you've just done the monkey see, monkey do type of thing, and you followed me very well if you got the program running. So to internalize it, generate your own data and your own product. And then we're going to go on after that and create some more realistic data storage rather than just fake data like we have here. So we'll see you soon.